Welcome to your most recent episode of Tech Law 10, where technology, information technology, and the law intersect. I'm Eric Sinrod from Duane Morris, international law firm based in San Francisco. As always, I'm joined by my colleague across the pond in Mother England, Jonathan Armstrong. So, Jonathan, is it true you've been doing some hallucinating lately? Again?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Thanks very much, Eric, and welcome everyone. I think it is the perennial topic amongst lawyers, isn't it? But I have been fortunate enough to be over in Chicago at the Relativity Conference and then in Hamburg, Germany, for the New York State Bar Association international meeting. And obviously, hallucination in the law has been headline news. And we've talked about this before, and we've talked about the New York State Bar Association AI Task Force report, which I was pleased to co-author back in 2024. And it seems that the issues of hallucination have gone on apace. So I know it's almost we had this discussion in Chicago, and I'm a big fan of us almost stopping using the word hallucination. As you know, we talked about it last time, was in Nashville recently, and I wondered if we should have a country music song that says, "Honey, he ain't hallucinating, he's lying to you," and the more we call hallucination lies, I think the more we get to the truth and the size of the problem. There's a great database run by Damien Charlatan. It's a French database where Damien this morning is listing 487 hallucination cases that have reached court. But a German judge on my panel in Hamburg said he thinks this is the tip of the iceberg, that he also believes that there are hallucinations in court judgments that are going unchecked, because almost who would check the judgment after a court has issued it? And we had a great contribution in Hamburg from Judge Lee, who's leading some of the efforts of the South Korean Supreme Court in this area, who also talked about cases that just hadn't really been discovered until months or years afterwards. So I think these 487 cases are somewhat the tip of the iceberg. But we've had people turn up in court with cases that don't exist in 22 countries now. It's not just a problem confined to the US and the UK. Even smaller countries like Tanzania, Trinidad and Tobago, Zimbabwe are grappling with these problems. And I think it creates all sorts of issues, not just in the law, but in everyday life. Italy, for example, has brought in a new AI Act recently that's sort of slightly adjacent to the EU AI Act, which astute listeners will remember as come into force gradually, but starting from February. So we already have the AI literacy obligations. We already have some obligations to deal with prohibited AI. And now alongside that in Italy, we've got some additional measures. And one of the issues that they're trying to address in their legislation is almost the preservation of traditional disciplines. And we've seen cases, outside the law where AI's guesswork has done harm. We've seen cases where it's helped diagnose people, but wrongly. It's taught them how to deal with dental pain, but wrongly. And partly what Italy are trying to address, I think, is we have rules in place that that professionalize some professions where it's essential. In the US and the UK, we have rules on that prohibit the unauthorized practice of law. Law in the UK, certain reserved acts like litigation are reserved to lawyers. medical operations are reserved to people who know this stuff, not who've Googled an answer or super Googled an answer by using AI to look at a whole host of different websites. And I think it goes back to something that we've talked about before, which is this whole pot of data. I think that a lot of the 487 hallucination cases we're seeing now are lawyers using AI without realizing it, because we've seen in common search engines that the first answer we might get is an AI-generated guess rather than a link to the original source, as we used to get in search engines. And I think there's a misunderstanding among some people that that answer is AI generated rather than fact. Now, I know some of the common search engines have recently changed their on-screen warnings to try and emphasize that, and they've put along the bottom of the result, this is AI generated and may not be accurate. But I'm not sure if that's good enough. And I think also, desperate people will try desperate things. We've seen that with the Matrix Freedom cases in the UK, for example, where people who struggled with debt have used a quack non-lawyer to issue proceedings on their behalf or to support them in those proceedings. I have had personal experience of a friend of the family who was suffering from cancer and resorted to quack remedies to try and save his life, and unfortunately shortened it. And AI proliferates those type of harms. And one final, and maybe two final things. We've had some recent litigation here over lawyers signing off proceedings rather than people who work for lawyers. It's a case called Mazua. And I think we haven't perhaps thought the implications through of that on AI legal applications. And I think we perhaps haven't concentrated closely enough on false claims that are made for some AI applications. I know, for example, in your part of the world, Do Not Pay said that they would replace lawyers in different areas, but in fact entered into a settlement with the Federal Trade Commission because the FTC alleged that they'd made promises about the software that overestimated what it could do. So I guess my question to you, Eric, is the word hallucination part of the problem? Is that a tech bro term that sort of excuses what are actually errors, and errors that have gone beyond being something of a joke to something that does real harm? And as a result, is Italy on the right lines by trying to regulate to preserve established professions and prevent harm?
I think your question answers itself. Yes. And also, I'm not going to sing back to you. Your country singing was wonderful, but please don't quit your day job. Yes, I agree with the premise of your question. And I do believe that you mentioned 487 reported cases of hallucinations showing up in court proceedings. That has to be the tip of the iceberg, don't you think? And you make a very good point, and I was thinking about this myself about court judgments. How much is AI infiltrated into what's being pronounced in those judgments? And again, is it erroneous as opposed to some fanciful hallucination? And of course, here, many times, judgments that come down from courts, either side in a case will submit proposed findings of facts and conclusions of law. And oftentimes, judges will adopt largely or wholly a proposed judgment from one side of a case as the judgment of the court for the winning side. And so, yes, it can appear there too. Or perhaps, law clerks working for judges They do they do the research. The judges don't have the time. They're in court so much and they're busy and they have so many cases. Again, they can use AI. Interestingly, I now have, university students who are currently in law school, and I have a weekly discussion group with them. And they've been telling me that in law school, they're being taught. Now, this is just a few people telling me this about several law schools. So I'm not speaking generally about all law schools in the United States or globally, but they're teaching students how to use AI in terms of crafting legal submissions. Problematical, potentially. And I have undergraduate students right now in this country. Those are students, well, most of my students are between the ages of 20 and 22. Law school students are a little bit older. But I'm now facing a generation of students that are growing up on AI and they become completely dependent on it. And it's almost anathema for them to think of not using AI. So there needs to be a lot of education. I at least try to provide it that students, they need it. They can use it as a starting block, as a tool, but clearly they must independently investigate their sources. And that's obviously true for lawyers. Many law firms prohibit lawyers from using lawyers and their law firms using AI to even start initial drafting of papers or to do the legal research. But of course, if it happens, there has to be so much checking because, we know how AI works. It combs the internet, it packages information, it brings it back. And there's much on the internet that is not accurate. So there's the expression garbage in, garbage out. Also, sometimes the information you receive back from an AI query can be biased by the question itself, the way the question is framed. If it's framed in the positive, you might get an answer back that sort of supports the positivity of the question. If it's a negative, that could show up in the healthcare area too. It's a big issue in the legal world. It's a big issue generally. Our stock market here in the U.S. has been soaring, even though we have negative economic signals because there are certain very large companies that are heavily invested in AI. And we'll see where we go with all of that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Where jobs are being eliminated because of AI. Amazon recently announced it's eliminating hundreds of jobs because of AI capabilities. Are you better off with the AI function versus the human function? I mean, this train is out of the station, of course, and we're just seeing where it's going. Those are my thoughts in response to your question. I hope I responded to you well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think my personal point of view is if you're a law firm leader who thinks you've banned AI in your law firm, go and find a deck chair next to King Canute and see how far you can push the tide back. There's all sorts of worthy studies that say that, the choice if you're an employer is whether you have authorized and legitimate AI or whether you have shadow AI. That's your choice. No AI isn't the choice. And a colleague of mine, I think I might have mentioned it on a podcast before, there's no better example, sat next to somebody on a train. Obviously, the use of AI was banned on their network. So they were literally copying out onto their own device the questions that were being asked, getting the answers and copying them back in. And as I say, with this prevalence of AI in search, I think anybody who thinks that they can ban AI once their bump's felt.
It's too easy, and I'm seeing it now with this younger generation. I will tell you at first blush now when I'm reading student investigative and research papers that come back to me, at first blush, the quality of the papers has gone up markedly over the last 5 or 6 years within the four corners of the document. But then it's up to me as the professor to get behind the writing that seems very packaged to see, what the ultimate sources are and the accuracy of it. And I tell my students, I know how to figure it out. So be careful. The best cross check I have, and hopefully I'm not taking this too much into the university realm, is when they do their actual presentations, got their papers in front of them, and what do they actually know, and how can they respond to my questions? But I think that also resembles other aspects of life. If you're wholly dependent on AI, and then you need to think on your feet in court, for example, are you losing the alacrity to do that by being so heavily dependent on something that's not your own thought process and the actual foundational facts of law?
I think that's a great point, and a lot of the recent cases we've seen in the UK, the Allende case being one, have shown that gulf actually between the written word that can be supported via AI versus oral advocacy that can't. So I think that's a really great point.
Yeah. So are we real or are we hallucinating right now, sir?
That's right. And I
Well,
guess this is part of the debate, isn't it? We'll put this on our LinkedIn page. It's just TechLaw10 for those people who use LinkedIn. And if people have got a contribute, let us know. If they've got personal experience of hallucination, either in the legal environment or medical or dentistry or veterinary, then let us know because we're interested in these sort of cases, and maybe we'll return to the topic in a future podcast.
I'm sure we will. I think we're approaching podcast number 300 if we're not there already. But thank you for joining me. My name is Eric Sinrod. I'm in the law firm Dwayne Morris. I'm in the San Francisco office. My email is ejsinrod@dwaynemorris.com, although I think it will appear. Jonathan, thank you for hosting.
Yeah, no, pleasure. And it should appear by the magic of either AI or some very kind person who edits this and puts it together. I'm Jonathan Armstrong, jonathan.armstrong at puntersouthall.law. As we said, we'll put our contact details at the bottom of the screen. There'll be some links to some other stuff, including the database we've talked about. And all that remains is to thank you for watching or for listening.
And a shout out to the kind person who actually is putting this all together. It's not AI. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. All right. Cheers.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam.